Hi, Paige. I'm so glad that you're here today.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Do you want to tell us any about your journey?
I would love to tell you about it. So, I am actually a PK. I'm a pastor's kid. My dad actually started the church where I work 38 years ago in our living room. And so I grew up, as a typical pastor's kid, involved in everything in church every time the doors opened. At the same time saying, I will never work for a church. And I also said, I'm leaving this town, not coming back. And I did leave for college, but God and only the way God works, he kind of brought me full circle. He first brought me back to the same city. And then a little while later, I came on staff at our church. And I have actually worked at this church now for 20 years, which is crazy, especially in today's world. Most people do not stay around that long. And so I have gotten to wear almost every hat you can imagine on a church staff. It's for sure been a journey. My dad actually is no longer the senior pastor. About 3 years ago, we had a transition. And so I even got to walk through that. And I've also gotten to just watch our church grow. Because like I said, it grew from 30 people in our living room to now we have 4 campuses. And it's kind of a mega church, even though we try not to be too mega-ish. We try to keep it small. So that's kind of my journey in the church world. And as I've been working on a church staff, part of my job for probably the last 10 years was to give oversight to our women's ministry. And I'll be honest, I was also one of those girls who said, I don't want to do women's ministry. I don't actually enjoy, the fluff and I don't know what image I had of women's ministry. I don't know if you've experienced that yourself or other women that have said that. And then the Lord just so graciously said, well, first of all, you are going to do this. I'm asking you to do this. You can do it differently. And so I've just kind of stepped in, not just stepped in. I've been in it for about 10 years now. And I love women's ministry. I love working with women. That's where our podcast kind of, came out of, our women's ministry. The heart behind it was that I was looking around one day and just realizing how many phenomenal women were in our church, kind of in the middle of nowhere in desert Texas. And they didn't have stages. They, didn't have these huge platforms, but they had so much wisdom to share. And so I thought, okay, Lord, how can I create platforms for women to share their voices? And so that's why I started the podcast. I first started it with I'm just going to ask women that we would, label as just an ordinary woman, but she has a story. And let's make space for her to share her story. And from that's even kind of a little bit of the connection of the book, was this realization and even just feeling like this call from the Lord of like, every woman has a story to share, but we have to make space for that.
I love it. And that's because I'm so excited to learn about you. And I love that correlation right there of the women around you, because I see that too. Everybody has a story and you feel this need to celebrate them or to help tell their story, or because it's just so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time, you writing this book about the women in the Bible who had a story too.
Yes. Yeah.
And how that comes back to how that can help us. So let's go to that. Let's see. In your new book, He Knows Your Name, it examines the stories of nameless women in the Bible. And you write on your Instagram feed, and this is really good.
Mm-hmm.
People need this message. They need to know that on days they feel overlooked and underappreciated, that there is one who loves and knows their name.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I feel this way often. And why do you think so many women today feel unseen, unheard, unknown?
Yeah.
And how can the women in the Bible help us with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think women, men too, but specifically women, so many of us, honestly, if we went around and asked women, everyone would say, yes, I feel this way sometimes. I feel overlooked. I feel unseen. I feel undervalued. What else I found? It's in every stage of life, right? I used to be a college pastor. And so talking to these young women in college who want to be seen by a prospective date or something like that, just like, does anyone see me? And then later on, maybe they are married and they're a young mother and they are in the trenches of young kids and they are doing the work that no one sees and that no one appreciates. They're keeping children alive. But again, they're like, nobody knows what I do. They're like, what are you doing? And then women that are in the workplace, I've been here in so many times where most of my job, yes, occasionally I'm on a stage, but most of my job is behind a computer screen or having individual conversations that no one is ever going to know about. And then now I've been talking to a lot of women who are empty nesters and are in kind of a season of retirement. And our world really says in that season of, you know what, your value has been used and you just kind of float on off. And so I just think in every season of life, it is this constant question of, does anybody see me? Does anybody know what I'm doing? I feel like I just feel undervalued. And here's the thing, we were created in our core to know that we have value. We were created that way on purpose by the Lord because He delights in coming close and saying, no, I see you and I love you and I value you. It's just that we have all of these distractions in our life that are literally screaming at us that are saying, this is what equals value. It's young, it's shiny, it's stages, it's Instagram follows. And we really have to fight. Like, is that the truth? Or is what the Word of God says the truth? That no, my value comes from my relationship with Him. So that's kind of where it's coming from. So my book, I look at nameless women in the Bible, specifically the nameless women in the Gospels. There's nameless women all throughout the Bible, but I had to really focus in. I really wanted to look at the women in the Gospels that we don't know their name. We know their stories, but we don't know their name. And some of them get a lot of airtime in the Christian world. It's the woman at the well. It's the woman with the issue of blood. It's the widow with two mites. And what I wanted to do was really look at the encounters that they each had with Jesus and notice how He responded to them, because I think it's a picture of how He responds to us today. And also then look at then what did they do in return to respond back to Him? Because I think it has something to teach us.
Well, that's what I was just thinking when you said that, is that it's when we look at that, then we can figure out how to respond to each other and to treat each other better and how to see and know each other.
Yes, exactly. Because we begin to see ourselves in the lens of what Jesus is doing and how He's responding to the women. But then we could also see like, okay, we're supposed to be like Jesus. And if Jesus would pause for these women that were on the, on the fringes, in the margins, I want to be more like Him. So Lord, help me to slow my pace so that I can see women the way You saw them. That's one thing He's been talking to me about. We never see Jesus run in Scripture. He's walking. And He had a lot of things to do. Like if anyone had a reason to be in a rush, to be in a hurry, it was Jesus, but He didn't. He took His time. He didn't see interruptions as a nuisance, but He saw them as an opportunity to speak value and to bring healing to people who needed it. And that's something I think that as believers, we're called to do as well.
By looking at the women that we're talking about in the Gospels, the unnamed women, and how He responded, how they responded, then we can be better disciples ourselves. That's what I'm getting from all of this. And isn't that the hard part? Is sometimes you want to be a good Christian woman, but it's sometimes hard to love. Sometimes it's hard to have compassion. Sometimes it's hard to make space or time for somebody else. And sometimes it's because we're selfish, or I know for me, I can be very selfish, or I can be afraid of their pain. Or I always know when I answer the call to do that, lean in, it always leads to something wonderful.
It's so true. It really is. I actually had an experience yesterday, Deborah. I was eating lunch with a friend whose child was recently diagnosed with cancer. And it's hard. It's hard to just be with someone when they're in so much pain and in so much grief, and there are no answers. There's no easy. And actually, even just this morning, I was spending some time with the Lord, just praying for her. And I really felt like the Lord asked me this question. I know you want a solution, but I'm just asking you to surrender and keep walking with her. And I just think that was what Jesus did too. Like, but you're right. That does not come natural at all. That's my thing is I want to fix things. I want to solve things. And the Lord is really teaching me He is the solution, regardless of what it looks like.
Love that. I'm a fixer too. And my fixing often is taken more as meddling or,
Yes.
or opinions that aren't really needed when I'm learning just like what you said, just to surrender and to just walk with them. And there's peace in that because having to try to fix something when it's impossible just creates all this anxiety and stress. And it's not what we were even asked to do.
Right.
Jesus never asked us to fix somebody. Right?
You're so true. You're right. Absolutely. Absolutely. You saying that makes me even think there are a couple of these stories where Jesus encounters women where the disciples speak up just a little bit. And they're always very much their responses are really like what my first responses are. Like with the woman with the issue of blood, when Jesus stops to say, "Who touched me?" Peter's like, "Let me solve this. Everyone's touched you. Let's move on. We got things to do." And then there's another story where the disciples are like, "Listen, we have more important things to do than to have this conversation with a woman who's on the fringes." And so I've really been asking myself that question is, Lord, am I having a Christ-like response or a disciple-like response? That response, because I want to have a Christ-like response. But it's hard. It's just a constant staying as sensitive as we can to the voice of the Holy Spirit.
That is a wonderful question to ask ourselves. So let's go back to, we're kind of talking a little bit about this, but so we talked some about some of the nameless women in the Gospels. And we talked about that Jesus was with them. He took the time to stop and have conversations with them and to listen. And so when we think about them and we think about our own problems, maybe our difficulties, is Jesus with us today in those? And are we His own?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say an enthusiastic yes. He is with us. And yet, here's the truth. Sometimes He's quiet. There will be seasons where, and when I say quiet, it's not that He's ignoring us. I think He's working. He's allowing us. Sometimes His silence forces us to actually unearth what's really going on in our hearts and our minds. Sometimes we feel like Jesus is quiet because He's not answering the question that we're asking. He's saying something different. Because that's something He's taught me too, is the question that you think is the question is actually not the issue. And so I think sometimes we lie to ourselves and we begin to believe the lie that He's actually not with me. I'm praying, I'm reading the Word, but I feel like, I remember for me, there was a season where I almost felt like my prayers, there was a ceiling over my head, and it was just they would just bounce off the ceiling and come back down. But actually, it was a season where God was so close and He was carrying me through a season, and He is not afraid to let us be uncomfortable. He's not afraid for us to not get all of the perfect answers we want if He knows it's building something inside of us. And so I think it is just coming to a place where we believe, regardless of how we feel, that he is with us. He is with us. And he's not just with us and like a patch on the shoulder every once in a while, here I am. But no, like he is with us all the time. He carries us. He speaks to us. Like he is for us. And sometimes it's an intentional decision also to believe it, because sometimes you won't feel it, but it is still truth. Yeah.
Now, at the message of He Knows Your Name, is that we are known, seen, loved, and chosen by a great God. And that's just what we've been talking about. But you also state an especially important part, which was just one of these aha, epiphany, revelation moments for me when I read it, and he wants to be known by you in return. And you wrote that we are known only as we know him. And so this pondering, thinking, how do we know God? So let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's do. So that's kind of like this weird, not weird, but it's this statement like you really kind of do have to just sit with it, and think, okay, what is she saying? What does she mean? Even when I wrote it, I was writing, I had 3 different editors that go over the words. And one of them really was like, what do you mean by this? And I said, well, this is why we're not just looking at these stories, but we're also in the book looking at different characteristics or names of God, because I really do believe this. There's an entire self-help industry devoted to people who want to know themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. I like a good self-help book every once in a while. But I have always walked away from any self-help book having good tools and some resources, but not actually having a sense of security internally that who I am is enough and that I am his. But what I've discovered is as we get to know him, and not just like in a, abstract, oh, he's God, but as we get to actually know his characteristics, his attributes, his names, one way he reveals himself to us in scripture is the fact that God has so many names, We get to know him as our shepherd. We get to know him by the name of Jehovah Jireh, our provider. We get to know him, as living water. He calls himself so many things. So what does that mean? And we begin to discover who he is. What then happens is because we are a creation of his, as we get to know him, it really informs us about who we are. So all of a sudden, when I get to know Jesus as my shepherd, then I discover, oh, I am a sheep. And what does that mean? It means there is so much security because he's going to guide me and he's going to lead me. And he's not just any shepherd, he is the good shepherd. So that's where I think sometimes women, even wonderful believers, Christian women, we can open up our Bible and start trying to find all the scriptures about us, which that's fine. But it's when we begin to say, I'm going to open up the word and go after discovering more about who God is, because it's an upside down kingdom, God works counterculturally. As we get to know him, we grow in security about who we are. So that's what I mean by that.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
And it seems on that line that we all need to be known. And so tell us what a life might look like for us if we lay down our striving to be known by the world and others instead of being known by God.
Yeah, that's a good question.
So we're sort of making our transition from what you just said about...
Yes. About being known. Yeah, as you get to know Jesus more and you become more secure in the fact that you are known, your life will look different. I think you will find yourself much more secure. I think that it begins to look like you stop performing for love. You are actually able to deal with some of those people-pleasing tendencies that I think most women have. And you begin to see people differently. No longer do you walk in a room and think, oh, what does everyone think about me? Instead, you begin to walk into the room and you begin to say, oh, there you are. How can I, connect with these people? And it just changes our view from being inward and self-focused to being upward focused and outward focused to other people.
That's a way better way to live.
So much better. Yes.
so much better. I have, been going through, my sanctification walk. I came into being a believer later in life. Mm-hmm. So I'm 64, so in my 50s. And I work in the film industry as a makeup artist. I had a conversion moment on a film location in Budapest. And so I came back home, and my husband at the same time had one too. But he was in Los Angeles. And the story circles around my best friend at the time too, down the line, she would come back to Christ too. So it was just this amazing moment to see how God can work across time and touch hearts. So then my eyes were open, and then I had my Christian sanctification walk and it was so black and white, because here I am, so many years of living one way, now having to live another way. So my discovery was things like ambition and striving, which I was a very ambitious, striving person, and very jealous. Having to see that although I'm a new creation, how to let those old habits, old ways, old clothes. And so some part of my walk has been on that. I do believe that God brings us everything that we need at the time that we need it. So bringing you and your message to me at this time in my life. And this is so wonderful with your book in this, and this will definitely help me.
Oh, I love that.
I just wanted to share that with
I'm
you.
so glad you did.
That makes sense.
It totally does. I have so many questions for you now. I mean, what an amazing story, Deborah. I really love that. I've actually been to Budapest. Let me ask you, I know this is you asking me questions, but I want to know, how did you lay those things down? Was it a process?
When I work now, I go in without the ambition, the striving, and the competition. But because of my old habits, I have, for instance, the last job, younger, prettier girl got promoted. I didn't even want the promotion, but I felt like poison shooting through me. And I left the room because I got to go for a walk. And I felt like, I think, a vision of when you're talking about Jesus being the shepherd of green pastures. And he showed me that you're in my green pasture. You may be here on this sound stage, walking along all these people, but you're here on my green pasture, and you're beside still waters. And your shepherd's here.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about. Like, when you really encountered him and who he is, it brought what your heart needed. That's my thing in this, even just in writing this book, is like, it's those moments, it's those like just personal words directly from the Lord that it hits different, and how it affects us is like nothing else. Like, it brings the like that one moment can bring security that all sorts of other things are going to leave it wanting. And so how powerful that you recognized in that moment, and therefore you stepped away to encounter him, because that's what you needed.
So this is a beautiful excerpt from chapter 1. There were nameless women walking through deep waters of difficulty and fires of oppression, and he was there. He knew them and called them his own. How can we today know he is with us too in our difficulties and fires? And how do Jesus' interactions with unnamed women shed light on his love for each of his daughters in the 21st century?
It's hard on the best of days to really believe sometimes, like I'm secure, I'm good, But when the fire is raging and the water is rising and we feel so helpless, I think all the more that's when we desperately need to know that he has us. And what I love about Jesus is as soon as we call out, help, like that's all we have to do. Like it doesn't have to be this grandiose prayer. One of the chapters in my book is all about prayer, actually, and about our words. I talk about how I think sometimes we've just become too polite in our prayers even. But there's something about when you're in the fire that kind of goes out the window. And you do just say, Jesus, I need you to help me. And he will so close. It kind of goes back to even when I was talking about with my friend I was having lunch with yesterday. She was just reminding me of his goodness and him being so near to her in some of her really darkest moments, deep wrestling, questioning him. And yet she said, you know what, Paige, I have felt him be near. And I think, especially when we're in those hard places, you even just talked about this a minute ago, he will send people, situations, nature, I believe that with my whole heart. He will send things our way to say, I am with you. You're still walking through this fire, but you will not be burned. I am with you. It is painful, I know, but I am with you. And you are going through it. You're not going to stay in it. You're going to go through it. And so these stories of these women, that's what they do, is they show how Jesus does that.
They do. It's so important to know that he's with you in your difficulty.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that people like your friend, like when I have a friend that was going through deep suffering and she's doing so much better now. But I have another friend I have a lot of friends that are going through a lot of deep suffering right now. I know that, and one that's been physical, another, her daughter actually passed from cancer, my cousin. And in another one, it's more relationship, but it's just terrible what she's suffering through. I feel kind of is that they're wonderful witnesses because we're all, like what one friend said to me, it's not if it's going to happen to you. It's,
I tell a story in the book that happened to me over a decade ago. Part of my job at the church is that we have a global missions department. And so over a decade ago, my husband and I, we took a group of 27 people to Israel. And literally the day before we left, it's now actually classified technically as a war between Lebanon and Israel. At the time, we were like, it's a little skirmish. Should we still go? Should we not go? So we went back and forth and we decided we're going to go. We had peace about it. I'm going to tell the story really fast, but it's going to link with what you said. We get there, we land, we literally are given these instructions that, okay, here's the thing. I think we're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. But here's the deal. If you hear this siren, you have 45 seconds to seek shelter. Of course, everyone on our team is like, I'm sorry. Did you say 45 seconds? And they said, yeah, here's the thing. The siren will only go off if an actual missile has been sighted and it's incoming. There's no other precautions because it could happen at any minute. So we're like, okay, all right, okay, we got it. Well, things were fairly calm. But our third day in, we actually were on the Sea of Galilee. So our whole team, 27 of us, we get into this beautiful boat. And I knew it was this powerful moment. So I wanted us to do it. And so we are in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. And all of a sudden, in a faint, I hear the whoop, from the shore. And I look over at my husband and our guide, and he begins to turn the boat and we start making our way back. And he begins to basically, yes, you can hear that siren. There are incoming missiles. And here's the plan. There's this rock wall. You're going to, as soon as we dock, you're going to run and go crouch by this rock wall. I've called our bus. It's on its way, but it's not here yet. And so everyone is trying to figure all of that out. And my husband at that moment comes up to me and he says, hey, I just want to remind you, we're the leaders. So this is a leave no man behind situation. And so we cannot worry as much about our safety as just getting everyone off. And we looked around and we actually had 3 women in their 70s on our team. And so we quickly divided them up, and he was going to take one. Another strong man was going to walk with another one. And then I was going to walk with a woman who actually was in her 80s. Her name was Miss Wanda, and just be with them to get them to the wall. And so we dock, and the youngins are like jumping and running, and everyone's getting off. My husband actually picked up his woman and like ran with her. So I'm looking up and I realize it's only me and Miss Wanda left. Okay. And so we're walking to that wall, and we're not moving as fast as I would like to move. And so I'm like, hey, Miss Wanda, can we go any faster? Let's go a little faster. And Deborah, without missing a beat, she actually slowed down, and she looked at me and she said, darling, my Jesus promised me decades ago that I would see the walls of Jerusalem before I die. And this was her dream trip. And she said, and that's not on our itinerary for 2 more days. So I figure I've got 48 hours before he's going to take me out. And then she just kind of laughs and we get over it. And we were fine. Obviously, we're fine. I'm here to this day. We get out. But so as we're leaving on the bus, I was shaken. And not, yes, because it was a dangerous situation, but I was just so shaken by her words. And I looked out the window, and I will never forget just thinking, how I want to have faith like that. Like how does she have so much faith that a promise that she feels like Jesus gave to her decades ago, like she's taken it to the bank. Like it is so real that when actual missiles are incoming, she's going to slow down. I got to know Miss Wanda after that trip a lot more. And she was alive during World War II. She was one of the Rosie the Riveters, and she was a widow. She had lost her husband. What I discovered, so it goes back to what you said, like she was a woman who had walked through fire, multiple fires, and she had come out on the other side knowing, like not just a knowing in her head, but an unshakable knowing that when God says he was with her, he was with her. And so therefore, whatever else he had promised her, it was true. It was going to happen. So sometimes I think too, take hope when you are in the fire. You are discovering things about Jesus. And in that moment, we usually don't have the foresight to be like, and one day this is going to help someone else, but it will. Mm-hmm. It will. It really will. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely will. There was an epiphany moment with a fellow Christian makeup artist, and we were talking about how our story of pain or a trial or whatever is for her today, for another woman or another man or somebody else, to help them when they're going to go through this or when they're going to walk through that. And then just how powerful that is. So like how Miss Wanda's story, you'll carry that forever with you.
I will.
And I'll carry it now too.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is the power of these stories.
Yes. Yes. I think that's one reason why all of these nameless women's stories made it into the Bible. Because we don't know their names, but it's their stories that continue to speak to us. And that would be kind of even how I would end encouraging people listening, is knowing people may not know your name, but your life has the power to leave a legacy that points people to the truth about who Jesus is, you know? I think there's something really powerful too when we get over having our name known and we're more focused on just making his name known.
What I've discovered is life, I don't say it's easy, because the non-easy part is just ourselves always get in the way of everything. But the easiest part is when we do surrender and we do allow it to be all Jesus, and then life is easy, because his yoke is,
it's easy, and his burden is light.
Easy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sharing with you today and having you my listeners, I know all you out there listening right now will be so blessed. I pray that you will be blessed by our conversation today and by focusing light on the nameless women in the Bible. And when we feel nameless, we're never nameless.
Right. No, he knows us. Yeah.
In closing, is there anything else that you would like to share with us? Anything upcoming that you want to share, or where we can find you? And I'll put that all in the show notes.
Okay. But people can find me on Instagram and Facebook. It's Paige Allen, Texas. I want to encourage you, Deborah. Writing this book was a dream of mine for years. And it's even part of the story. I pitched it years ago at a writer's conference, and the acquisitions editor said, "Great idea. And I even like you, but nobody knows your name." And, that's part of the thing is you got to have some kind of platform to sell it. And God is so good 8 years later to just open doors. And that's what I want to even just encourage you with as you are obedient to write, because that's then what it just became about was you got to keep writing. You got to keep doing this. I gave you this message to carry on purpose, and I will open the doors in my right timing. And he did. He did in a miraculous kind of way. So I would love to get to know anybody listening. Yeah, you can follow me on the social media. And I just have this one book, but yeah, go check it out.